I'm just going to tell you a little story about our next speaker, is that while in LA, in the VIP section of a U2 concert, he met a lot of celebrities, including Cameron Diaz and all the U2 members. But he also met a very famous actress who we all know, Julia Roberts. And what he said to her was, "Hello, pretty woman." I thought that was hilarious, whether he was doing that. But let's give a huge we can and we will welcome to Jack Kavanagh.
Hello, hello. I am seriously hoping that the internet connection holds up, because it ducked in and out, a little bit while Layla was on. So I'm just so thrilled to be on with all of you here tonight. And I'm in incredible company, because what I said earlier was in the breakout rooms that really the things that I love and that's so integral to what I do and what I love about We Can and We Will is that we champion everyday heroes, and each and every one of us is an everyday hero. And we saw it in each of the stories already tonight. And Layla, that poem you read at the end was just breathtaking. So thank you. So I hope you're all okay for another couple of minutes. And really, my story, as with so many of you, entails a before and an after. And that's true for all of us in different parts of our lives. My central tenet is that we are each only human, that we each are, because of that, a masterpiece and a work in progress at the exact same time. And that each one of us has our own unique magic that is inseparable from us and unique compared to anybody else in the world. And that although it gets covered up sometimes, that is my mission, to help people uncover their magic, to let go of the baggage that carries us down, and to really express that unapologetically in their lives. So before I kick into it and maybe explain to you why all of you have the skill sets to lead your own life, and I mean lead your life and empower yourself and to show up fully in the world, I want you to, for a second, to think about a heart rate monitor. Because so many of us think, wouldn't it be wonderful if we went in a straight line from A to B in our lives? If we had an ambition and we went from the inception of the vision to achieving it. But when you compare that to a heart rate monitor, if you go from one side of the screen to the other, the game is over and you're dead. And so really what we want is this nice trajectory of the highs and lows, the peaks and troughs. And they are the emotional highs and lows of our lives. It is the love and the loss, the triumph and tragedy, and the list goes on. And they say that perspective shapes reality. Without us understanding what it is to feel love, we don't understand or have the perspective to know what it means to lose someone. Without facing massive setback, we don't appreciate what success is. And so with that as the frame, I'd like you to consider that the challenges that we repeatedly face and the journey that we go on as we go up and down that heartbeat of life that ties us all together is the one thing that allows us all to feel connected, and we feel it at the moment. So I'm going to start in a place that you might not expect, and that's talking about children. And the reason for that is because I think that children have the best leadership skills of anybody that I've ever come across. And each one of you learned these when you were children. So stick with me for a second. Children are endlessly curious. They ask question after question until they get a good answer. They're unapologetically honest in that they say what they mean and they mean what they say. They're incredibly resilient to failure and persistent with their goals. Just think about how many times they take the first stumble before they take the first steps, or how many times the food misses before it eventually lands in their mouth. They are more emotionally connected than any adult I've ever met in my whole life. And they actually laugh when they're happy and they cry when they're sad. There's none of this smoke and mirrors that we pick up after the age of 5 or 7. So ultimately, we would say that these young people are just busy being real. They're programmed for growth. And then the more intelligent adults come in and we start to socially condition them. And as part of that skill set, we introduce fear. And we say things like, no, you can't, it's too dangerous, stop that, don't go there. We start to instill limiting beliefs without even realizing it in an attempt to protect these young people. And if it's done well, that can be a wonderful thing. But so often it's done poorly. And instead of teaching kids valuable skill sets, we dampen their magic. And then those kids grow up to be called Jack and Layla and Patrick and James and all of you. And we spend the rest of our lives trying to let go of those limiting beliefs, to that baggage that we've all learned along the way, and step back into ourselves, our masterpiece that we were created as. And so through those early years, each one of us learns through the tribulations that we go through, the challenges and tribulations, to grow and adapt in response to that stimulus. And as teenagers, we get really good at it, and we start to fall into the comfort zone as we manage the day-to-day really well. And then eventually that comfort zone comes back to bite us in some way when, as adults, we're faced with a challenge. And the difference as an adult is that the skill set is no longer innate. We have to choose our response instead. And that's my story too. Growing up, I was one of those kids up at the beginning of the day and going till I passed out at night. Involved in all kinds of sports, from running, rugby, Gaelic soccer, hurling, the list went on. And when I entered primary school, my teacher phoned my mum on one of the first days in primary school. And she said, "Elmarie, have you got any idea what Jack got up to in class today?" Now, knowing full well that I wasn't an angel, my mum responded by saying, "No, sure, what could he have possibly done wrong?" Well, it turns out that curiosity had gotten the better of me and that I jocked one of the girls. I'll just pause for your laughter there, but so I jocked one of the girls, and what they would later realize was that my misbehavior and the fact that I was largely written off as a problem child in my early years in school was actually because I was really severely dyslexic. And so my energy was being misplaced in all sorts of different directions because I didn't want people to understand, or not to understand, but to think I was stupid. And gradually, as I started to get the help that I needed and the assistance that I needed, I really started to learn how to learn and how to apply myself. And that became something that was very important and totally transformed my life. And the real tangible thing that I can remember is that Harry Potter was a big thing at that time. And I went from a position of me not being able to read the books and my dad having to read them to me, to me then being able to read the books. And I entered this world of magic. And that became a big piece of the decision that I would make for my secondary school. I was late applying to the local schools and I was on the waiting list. And as I went around the different open days, we said we'd check out some boarding schools because my dad had gone to a boarding school. And I remember driving down the avenue of a boarding school in Kildare called Clongowes and seeing what I thought to be a castle at the end of the avenue. And it was the easiest decision I ever made because I decided I was heading off to Hogwarts. And I spent 6 amazing years in a boarding school with 400 other guys. And love of sports, particularly of running, rugby, and my passion, which would develop during those years, was windsurfing. And I learned different things from the different sports. And like all of you, you will remember that going through the years of being a teenager, there's all this questioning and growth that starts to happen. And as I pushed out against the comfort zones of my parents and my teachers, my coaches, and my own comfort zones, I started asking all sorts of questions. I asked how I fit in with the world and if that even mattered. I asked questions about my sense of the religion and spirituality I've been brought up in. I asked questions about my body image, and the list went on and on and on. And during those years, I started to get a good sense of myself and to get some answers to those questions. And as I transitioned from primary to secondary school, I became quite a diligent guy. And my interests really found their way to the intersection between health and science. And I was fascinated by people and how do we get people to be as well as they possibly can be in their lives. And although it was never on my CAO, I ended up studying pharmacy. And as I transitioned into first year college in Trinity, I can remember two stark things stood out to me. For the first time in 6 years, I was in control of when the lights went out in that first year in college. And the second thing, I was introduced to a whole other gender that I didn't even know existed. And that was a steep learning curve, you could say, that year, but it was great fun. And at the end of that summer, after I finished my exams, I headed down to the west of Ireland. And it was this place that had become an absolute sanctuary for me. It was the place where I went to express my passion at the time, which was windsurfing. I'd become absolutely fascinated. Like every morsel of my body was enthralled with windsurfing and just wanted to be on the water all the time. And the best way that I could do that was by becoming a windsurfing instructor and a lifeguard. And so I would go down to the west of Ireland and spend my summers basically living on the beach, instructing kids how to windsurf in an Irish college called Coláiste Uisce. And I remember on one of the first days down there, this was the place where I really found my tribe. And so many people find that within We Can and We Will, where we're surrounded by like-minded people, and things just start to click. That when we're facing challenges and so on, these people are the people that will support us and champion us. And that's what I found for the first time down there. And I remember on one of the first days that summer cycling off to the beach by myself. And it was one of those ideal scenes where the only footprints as I looked back down the beach were my own, and the sun was gently setting over the breaking waves. And I just caught myself smiling. You know, when you catch yourself in a moment. And I realized that for the first time that I was coming up with good answers to the questions that I was asking. And I was starting to become comfortable with myself. Now, every single one of you will know that life doesn't often let us remain in the comfort zone for too long. And at the end of that summer, my life got shaken up in a massive way. On the first day of a holiday in Portugal with 7 of my best mates, I ran down the beach as I had done so many times that day and that summer. I dived into the water, not anticipating just how shallow it was, and my head collided with a sandbank, and in that moment, I broke my neck. You could say that that was a life-changing moment, and you would expect that someone would panic in a scenario like that, but actually time kind of slowed down. Maybe it was because I had so much experience in the water that happened, but really time slowed down, and the things that were most important in my life really played like a movie reel across my vision. I was face down in the water, I couldn't move, and I saw my family. I saw my mum and dad and 2 sisters at home. I saw the dog Poppy. I saw my friends on the beach, and I wondered would they get to me before I drowned, and if not, how would they live with that? I thought back to my girlfriend at the time and to the dinner that we had planned at the end of that week when I got back. And as all of this was going through my mind, and I realized I maybe had a few seconds, 30 seconds max of oxygen left before I blacked out and things took a turn for the worst, one of my best mates, Stephen, who I'd spent 6 years living with in secondary school, stuck his hand in under my shoulder, lifted me up, and he said, "What are you playing at?" Thinking that I was joking around. And I said, "Steve, I hit my head. I think I may have damaged my neck and I can't move." And he just goes, "You're at it again," and dropped me back in the water. Luckily, he soon realized I wasn't playing around. And in the hours afterwards, I was taken out of the water. Moments afterwards, I was taken out of the water. And in the hours that would proceed, I was taken by air ambulance to intensive care. And I remember the next day waking up and gradually becoming aware of my surroundings, counting the 8 screws in the light fitting above my head, realizing that there was tubes going down my throat, that were keeping me breathing, that were keeping me hydrated and fed, that I had a metal cage around my head that would support my at the time broken spine. And it was at that time that I became aware of my best friend Gareth walking around the bottom of my bed, and I was greeted by this smiling but tear-filled face. And it was at that time, despite not being able to speak, that I mouthed the words, "It's going to be okay." And that was my first decision. That was my first decision that I was, as delirious as I was, going to take some sort of control in this scenario. I had no idea what that would look like. In the weeks afterwards, I was flown back by air ambulance to Ireland. I went from intensive care after nearly not making it. And I understand what it is for those people that are currently struggling in intensive care with ventilators and all the complications that come with that, because that was me. And I barely made it, but I did. And a few months later, I found myself out in rehab in Dunleary. And it was really there that things started from scratch for me. I was like a child. And as I began to learn to breathe unaided without the assistance of the ventilator, it was like having the umbilical cord pulled as a child. And literally dependent on people for everything. And the only difference was that now, as 20-year-old Jack, I understood, unlike a child, what fear really meant. And as physically demanding as those months were in rehab, of relearning to use the remaining 15% muscle function I had remaining, of my shoulders, my biceps, and my wrists, to become as physically independent as I could. The hardest battle of all was actually the mental battle, because once again, I had to go back and ask myself all of those questions all over again. And I ultimately had to ask myself, had Jack fundamentally changed as a person? And happily, I realized that no, that I was still the same Jack, but that I'd unlocked this mental toolkit that all of you have as well. And it's that part of ourselves we only discover or uncover when we're faced with a big challenge or we take on a big challenge. And we've heard examples of both of those tonight. And I realized that I was capable of more than I ever imagined possible. And although I was lying on that bed, relearning to feed myself, to scratch my nose, and with the ultimate aim of being able to push a wheelchair at the time, I started to expand my vision for my life. And I set a vision that would inspire me for the next year and the next 5 years. And at the time, that initial vision became to go back to college. Now, an important framing in this is, and all of you understand this, that our life responds to the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves. And I remember my dad telling me quite a while later that on their flight over to Portugal to come and find me in intensive care, the question my mum kept asking Dad was, why Jack? Why would this happen to Jack? And Dad responded by saying, well, why not Jack? Why should this have happened to anybody else on the beach? And I asked the question, and we've all done it when we face big challenges in our lives, be it in a personal, be it in a professional, be it in a financial, or in a scenario like we all find ourselves in with such uncertainty at the moment. We say, why me, or why now? And I asked that question too. And then I actually soon realized that made me the victim of the scenario. And so I flipped the question and I said, why not me? And in doing so, a couple of really important things happened. I first recognized the situation in which I was in. I accepted on some level the reality that I faced. And secondly, I took responsibility not only to survive this, but made the decision that I was going to learn from it, to grow from it, and to thrive out of it. And that distinction between why me to why not me, coupled with understanding the other self, which is that we're capable of more than we ever imagined possible, is the story of so many of us. And that became the foundation that would allow me to, only 13 months later, go back to college, to live away from home, in the years afterwards to qualify as a pharmacist, to challenge every limiting belief that had been placed in my way, that for example, that I would need the assistance of two people to do anything for the rest of my life. And we've kind of blew everything out of the water, that I would never drive again, that I would never have a normal relationship, that I would never fill in the blank work again. And over the years, we've made award-winning documentaries about road trips in America that entailed me, as Amanda mentioned, meeting the pretty woman herself, from skydiving to whitewater rafting, learning to engage with my body again and express it in a way, understanding the power of gratitude and of a vision for your life. And I've constantly reset that bar in different ways. And now I think life takes you in a certain direction sometimes. And my fascination with the world of health and helping people to show up as their best in the world went from the world of pharmacy to actually a whole different area. I went back to college and I almost felt like I was doing pharmacy part-time, because I would finish my day in college and throw myself into learning about personal development and psychology, because it was what I needed to build a toolkit to allow me to thrive through what was a very challenging time where my whole life was ripped apart, and to begin to put back together the fragments of that broken life, to a point now where I became so fascinated with all of those things that I was learning along the way, that I've become a coach, that I've studied under all sorts of mentors, Amanda being one of them, Nicola Connolly Burns showing up along the way, people like John D. Martini. I qualified as a life coach and studied NLP and any number of other fields, because I fundamentally believe that every human being has magic to show the world, and that all we need to do is to create the right environments in which that gets to happen. And this is one of those environments. So I'll leave you with my three biggest lessons from over the years, and then a quote that I wrote during a time where I was struggling to accept the inner voice that we all hear sometimes, that tells us we need to follow our heart and let go of our head. The three biggest learnings that I've had over the past number of years is, number one, that everybody has their shit. It's just boxed in different ways. And what I mean by that is, as I go down the street, it's very obvious what my shit is. People can see on a surface level what that entails. But as I look across the street, I can't tell that Mary is suffering from crippling anxiety and barely got out the door this morning, that somebody else's parent has just been diagnosed with cancer, that another person is facing financial struggles, and the list goes on and on and on, that another person is struggling with their sexuality and trying to understand how to express that. Everybody faces their challenge. It's unique to the individual, and there's no hierarchy in suffering. Whatever you face is completely relevant, and you matter. That puts everybody on a level playing field when you come to understand that. So everybody has their shit. It's just boxed in different ways. The second thing that I learned was the power of choice over time dictates whether we survive in our lives or we thrive in our lives. Not every day is a good day, and that's so important to acknowledge. But the more we choose to say yes instead of no, I can instead of I can't, and to march on rather than to give up, the more we tilt that needle towards yes, I can, and to keep on fighting, the more empowered we become in our lives, and the compounding effect of the subtle decisions that we make day in, day out, from the smallest decision in the morning to get up and give the day a go, to the biggest decisions we make in our lives, they compound day after day. And the small decisions you make add up remarkably over time. So consider that in terms of going from a place of surviving to thriving in your life. I never made any big decision. I never did any big thing in one day. It's a compound effect for all of us over time to get to where we're going. And the third and totally the most important thing that I learned, And again, it came from something my dad said as I was heading out the door one day. And he said, impress yourself today, Jack. And he didn't realize just how profound that was, because each one of us has such a unique skill set. We each have such a unique way of expressing ourselves. We each have such a unique set of things that we can add and experiences that we can share to create room for others to show up authentically in their lives. And by me comparing myself to any other person, despite the trappings that we get caught in, like everyone does it, but by me comparing myself to any other person except the person I was yesterday, I'm doing myself and the world a disservice. And when I remind myself of that again and again and again, to measure myself off who I was yesterday, life transformed for me in a big way. I get out of my own way an awful lot more. The thing that I want to leave you with is a quote that I wrote at a time when the internal conflict in me had grown massively. My training and years of my life had come into the traditional health sciences and training as a pharmacist to qualify. And in the years afterwards, thinking that I had to pursue that path, that was my way of adding value to people and the world. And inside, all I wanted to do was to pursue this path of speaking and coaching, even though I had no idea what it would look like. The uncertainty that I was stepping into was big, rather than going from a clear path. And as I was struggling with this, I sat down to journal, as I often do when I'm faced with a big challenge. It's one of the practices, along with mindfulness and any number of other well-being things that we could talk about for hours. And I sat down to write, and these are the words that I came up with. I said, there is no right or wrong path, just a series of events that gives us a flavor of either what it is that sets our heart alight or dampens our soul. What I do know to be true is that in a life that is not always a smooth ride, and a world that is more disillusioned, disconnected, and full of people wearing masks than ever before, the bravest thing that any person can possibly do, despite the challenges they may face, is to bring their authentic selves to the world. And that is when the magic will happen. And that is what my work is all about now. As a speaker, as a coach, that's what my aim is. So I leave you with that. In whatever you're facing in your life, in whatever your aspirations are, remember, be brave, you matter. Cheers.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my word, Jack. That has been just a privilege to listen to be honest with you. I think I speak on behalf of everybody that is after listening to that talk to say thank you. That was just inspiring and incredible. And your attitude is an example to every human being on this planet. Thank you so much. I have tears in my eyes, to be honest with you, because that was just pretty special. And I think
I said to Ian, will you take this one? Because I can't.
Oh
I just read out what some people are saying there, Jack. And the whole time I was praying, don't let his internet go. Don't let his internet go. And it didn't, you know, it absolutely didn't. And it's live on Facebook and everything. And I'm hoping there's millions of people watching this.
Can I read some of these?
Of course you can.
Fantastic, Jack. Great attitude. Another person beyond words. Fair play to you and not giving up. Well bloody done. Inspirational human being. Grateful to hear, listening to you. An amazing attitude to have. It just goes on.
The why not me? I think that was a huge takeaway for people. I'd never heard, you know, put like that before. The why not me? And
it was just like you literally taking control of not being a victim of the situation. Yeah. Oh, look, oh my God. I'm going to be digesting this.
Well, thanks so much. And like a couple of things on that, like in any situation that we find ourselves in, it's so easy to slip into the negativity bias that we all have programmed into us. And it's so deeply ingrained in our psyche. It kept us safe hundreds of thousands of years ago on the savannah, but it doesn't really keep us safe as much anymore. And it leads to us getting in our own way. But the why not me is about why am I so special that I shouldn't face this challenge, whatever that is in your life. And that allows us, it's like Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and that space gives us freedom of choice. And as hard as it can be, if we can start to embrace that space, and that's what mindfulness is, that's all about, what the present moment is. If we can start to embrace that space more often, and it's a practice like anything, we get a lot more power back in our lives. And at the moment where people feel so much power has been taken out of their hands, there are still things we can control. And the only reason that anybody would resonate with my story is because each and every single one of you has something that you've seen in me within yourself. And all I am is a mirror for you. So
Incredible, incredible, incredible. Everybody's clapping here, virtually, but still clapping. So thank you so much. We are so privileged and humbled to have you share so open and honestly and authentically. How can people reach you, Jack?
So you'll catch me on all the social medias. We just, oh, here comes Sylvia. Just a sec, Sylvia. So you can catch me on all of the, just one sec there, just finishing up a call here, so it'll be 2 minutes, okay? So you can catch me on all of the social medias. We just actually launched a podcast called The Only Human Podcast, so some people might like to check that out. My handle on social media is Jack Kavanagh, IRL, for Ireland or in real life, even though it looks like Jack Kavanagh girl, but that is not intentional. And if anybody wants to reach out, I'm rebuilding my website at the moment, but you can get me by email as well at hello@jack-kavanagh.com. So I'd love to hear from anybody.
We will get you to put your details under this live stream on Facebook. And just want to say, we're going to wrap it up now. We're way over time, but what an evening, what an event. Absolutely inspiring. If you are not on fire after this evening, your flipping logs are wet. Yeah.